Non-stop rain, smell of burning cigarette, clock is ticking and the culprit observe everything. Audible Archives presenting The Measure of Deceit, a Drake Vane mystery, narrated by Rob, written by Raul. The Ashford rain fell in cold, persistent sheets, drumming on the rooftops like a warning. Drake Vane's coat was damp along the shoulders as he approached the narrow alley that led to the furniture workshop. Even in Ashford's oldest districts, secrets clung to brick and timber like soot, and Drake had learned early to read the faintest traces of them. Inside the workshop, the smell of varnish and sawdust was thick, cloying. The proprietor, a lean man with hands scarred by years of woodworking, wiped them on a ragged apron. He glanced nervously at Drake, his eyes flicking to the tape measure coiled on the bench. "Detective Vane," the man began, voice hesitant, It's bad. Really bad." Drake's steel-gray eyes swept the room. "Start from the beginning," he said, keeping his tone measured. "And don't leave anything out. Even details that seem trivial can matter." The man swallowed, placing the tape measure carefully on the counter as if it were evidence. "It's Miss Lillian Fairchild, found dead this morning. Odd circumstances. The body, she was measured. Precisely. The tape was around her waist. And her eyes were wide, like she'd seen something before she died." Drake's eyes narrowed. A measuring tape? A ritualistic element? Or a practical signature, like the marks left by an artisan? He crouched slightly, inspecting the wooden floor near the bench. There were faint scuff marks, footprints that didn't belong to the usual staff. The workshop had been moved through carefully. "Who found her?" Drake asked. "The apprentice. Samuel. He came in for the morning deliveries and called the police immediately. Poor lad, still shaking." Drake's notebook emerged from the inner pocket of his coat, the pages weatherproof and ready. He scribbled details: time, place, apparent method, signs of struggle. Every line, every observation was stored like a mental blueprint. "Who else has access here?" he asked, glancing at the rows of unfinished furniture. "Only Samuel, me, and Lillian. She was meticulous, always measuring, marking. Never sloppy. You could trust her hands." Drake's mind churned. Lillian Fairchild, young, precise and methodical. And now dead, with a tape measure as the only clue left by her killer. He imagined the sequence, the approach, the confrontation, the careful placement of the instrument. Whoever did this wanted to send a message. He asked to see the body. The coroner had already arrived, but had yet to remove her from the premises. Drake followed, keeping his revolver ready, though this was no battlefield. This was a puzzle. Lillian lay on a mat, her form rigid, the tape measure still faintly around her waist. There were no signs of a struggle beyond the small scuffs he had already noted. Her expression was frozen in surprise, but not terror. Drake studied it, a woman taken off guard, measured for reasons beyond simple death. "Detective," the coroner's assistant ventured. "You think murder?" Drake's voice was calm, precise. "I don't think. I observe. And what I observe tells me someone in this city planned this carefully. The method is deliberate. The killer knows Lillian, knows her habits. And the tape measure, it's their signature." He pulled his notebook closer, scribbling observations: the angle of the body, the scuff marks, the placement of tools, and the faint residue of varnish near her hands. Every detail mattered. Ashford had its secrets, and this workshop was now a nexus of one particularly dark one. Drake looked at the proprietor. "Stay available. Nothing leaves this workshop until I say so. And I want Samuel. I need to hear everything from him directly." The rain outside had intensified, tapping a rhythm like the ticking of a clock. Drake's eyes followed the line of a coiled tape measure. In that mundane object, he sensed the seed of a story, one that would pull him deep into deceit, obsession, and the lethal precision of a killer who understood measurement in more than inches. Ashford streets had whispered warnings before. Tonight they were screaming. The rain had eased to a fine drizzle by morning, leaving Ashford's cobblestones slick and reflective. Drake Vane stepped into the workshop again, notebook in hand, revolvers safely holstered. The air was thick with varnish and lingering tension, the faint scent of wood shavings mixing with the metallic edge of fear. Samuel, the apprentice, stood near the back, hands trembling, eyes wide. Drake approached slowly, careful not to intimidate the young man further. "Samuel," he said, voice low, steady, "I need everything you saw yesterday. Every detail, no matter how small." Samuel swallowed, glancing at the corpse draped carefully on the mat. "But I came in early, sir, like always." The workshop was quiet. "I noticed the door slightly ajar, which was odd. Lillian always locked up. And then," he shivered, "I found her. On the floor, like she'd been measured." Drake nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Step by step. What did you see before you called the authorities?" Samuel took a deep breath. The tape measure. It was still around her waist. Perfectly straight, taut. Nothing else out of place, except some of the tools. One of the chisels was on the floor, not in its place. "But I didn't touch anything. I just ran for help." Drake crouched, examining the floor. There were indeed subtle scuff marks, too deliberate to be accidental, too precise to be clumsy. Whoever had done this had moved carefully, leaving behind evidence only someone trained, or obsessively meticulous, would notice. "Did you see anyone else in the workshop?" Drake asked. Samuel shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I swear, it was empty when I came in. I thought I saw a shadow, maybe through the window. Or maybe it was my imagination." Drake's mind ran through possibilities. A shadow through the window could have been the killer leaving, or a witness attempting to hide. He would need to check the alley, the windows, and the street outside for signs of movement. And her habits? Drake pressed. Anything unusual in her routine? Someone she trusted? Anyone she argued with? Samuel hesitated. Lillian, she was careful, precise. She measured everything, every cut, every piece of wood. But she mentioned someone visiting recently. A man, short, always polite, asking about a special commission. She said she didn't like him, but he paid well, so she had to deal with him. Drake's eyes narrowed. A visitor who paid well but caused unease. That could be a motive, or perhaps the killer exploited her discomfort to create the perfect moment. He scribbled notes: visitor, commission, paid well, unease. Each piece was a thread. Pull the threads correctly, and the pattern of the murder would emerge. "Samuel," Drake said finally, standing, "I want you to stay here until I return. Do not let anyone in or out of this workshop without me knowing. You understand?" "Yes, sir," the apprentice replied, relief and fear mingling in his tone. Drake stepped outside, letting his coat soak in the drizzle, eyes scanning the alley. Footprints, faint scuffs, a dropped coin, anything could lead him to the visitor Samuel mentioned. The tape measure was more than a tool, it was a signature. And in Drake's mind, signatures were never random. Someone had planned this carefully. Someone knew how Lillian moved, how she measured, and how she would die without leaving a scream. The first step in unraveling the murder was clear. Trace the visitor, reconstruct their path, and find the moment where precision became lethal. Ashford had whispered another secret into Drake's ears, and he was listening intently. The alley behind the workshop glistened under Ashford's morning drizzle, each cobblestone reflecting the gray sky above. Drake Vane crouched low, eyes scanning the ground for the faintest traces. Footprints. A dropped coin. Scuff marks in the mud. Anything the killer, or the visitor, might have left behind. He traced the path Samuel had described, noting the angle at which the door had been pushed open. The faintest smudge on the threshold hinted at a hurried exit, shoes coated in the city's slick grime. Drake's fingers hovered above the marks, analyzing pressure points, weight distribution, stride length. This was more than a path, it was a story written in footprints. A faint glint caught his eye near the gutter. A piece of brass, bent slightly, engraved with a tiny fleur-de-lis. Drake picked it up carefully, examining it. A button, he muttered to himself. It was distinctive, likely from a coat or uniform. Whoever Lillian had spoken about, the visitor wore this, and it had been lost in haste. Drake followed the alley to the intersection of two narrow streets, his eyes scanning the surrounding buildings. Shadows clung to doorways and windows, hiding details from the untrained eye. He noted the pattern of footprints, matching them to the brass button. The visitor had left deliberately, but not flawlessly. Mistakes were always telling. He paused at a corner, watching the small cafe across the street. A man in a heavy coat lingered near the doorway, eyes darting. Drake's instincts screamed that this was the person Samuel had described. The way he shifted weight, the glances toward the workshop, the tight grip on a parcel, it all aligned. Drake crossed the street slowly, careful to avoid puddles that might betray his own position. As he neared the man, he observed a subtle movement. The man reached into his coat pocket, brushing against the parcel. Drake's hand rested near his revolver, ready but not yet drawn. "Detective Vane," the man said smoothly, recognizing Drake immediately. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me." "You're the visitor Samuel mentioned," Drake said, voice calm, eyes never leaving him. "The one who commissioned Lillian Fairchild. Who are you, and why were you there yesterday?" The man's eyes flickered, calculating, but he smiled faintly. "Names are tricky, detective. Let's just say I am someone who appreciates precision. Lillian's work, exquisite. And yes, I visited her. But I assure you, I had no part in her demise." Drake's gaze hardened. "Then why leave traces behind? The button, the footprints, the hurried exit. Someone wanted you to be noticed, or they wanted you to be implicated. Which is it?" The man shrugged, a practiced motion of indifference. "Perhaps a little of both. Ashford has a way of ensnaring those who come too close to its secrets. But I am no murderer. You'll see that soon enough." Drake studied him, noting subtle tells. The slight tremor in the right hand, the tension in the shoulders, the calculated calm that seemed almost rehearsed. He was hiding something, but whether it was the truth or a deeper lie remained to be seen. "You'll come with me," Drake said finally. "Back to the workshop. I have questions, and it's easier to answer them with the ledger and witnesses nearby." The man's smile didn't falter. "Lead the way, detective. Let's see if Ashford's mysteries can be solved by one man and his notebook." As they walked back through the misty streets, Drake's mind raced. The tape measure, the brass button, the visitor's calculated presence, they were pieces of a puzzle. And each piece brought him closer to understanding not just how Lillian had died, but why someone in Ashford could turn ordinary tools into instruments of precision, deception, and murder. Back inside the workshop, the air was thick with varnish and tension. The visitor, whose coat now hung neatly on a rack, remained calm, but Drake could see the subtle signs of unease, the slight twitch of a shoulder, the brief glance toward Samuel. Drake gestured toward the ledger. "I want the full story. Every visit, every interaction with Miss Fairchild. No omissions. Ashford isn't kind to those who conceal details." The man nodded slowly, his voice smooth. "Very well, detective. I commissioned some pieces from Lillian, a set of inlaid cabinets, meticulously measured and designed. She was a perfectionist, yes, but brilliant. I visited to discuss specifications. That's all. I never touched her, never harmed her." Drake's steel-gray eyes narrowed. "And the scuff marks? The misplaced chisel? The brass button found in the alley? Mistakes happen, but in your case, they happen at a very convenient time." The visitor's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles. "Convenient, yes. But coincidence does not equal culpability. You'll see that once all facts are laid bare. Lillian was meticulous. Someone else knew her routines. Someone else timed it perfectly." Drake moved closer, notebook open, ready. Who else knew her routines? Who else had access to her measurements, her schedules, her tools? The man hesitated, a shadow passing across his features. "The staff at the workshop, of course. Samuel, the proprietor, even her friends. But outside of that, I can't say. Lillian was private. Only a few trusted her completely." Drake considered this. Trust was always a fragile shield. Anyone close could betray, intentionally or not. He turned to Samuel, whose hands were still trembling. "Did she mention anyone unusual in her appointments? Clients, visitors, or perhaps someone who seemed persistent?" Samuel nodded slowly. There was one, a man who came almost every week, always asking questions about measurements, about the dimensions of cabinets and drawers. Lillian said he was strange, very precise. I think he was obsessed. Drake's pulse quickened. Obsession could be lethal. Obsession mixed with knowledge of routines and a tool as innocuous as a tape measure. This was the profile of someone who could orchestrate death with the precision of a craftsman. He scribbled notes rapidly: weekly visits, precise questioning, obsession, knowledge of routines. The visitor's smooth denials were not enough. Someone else had intersected with Lillian's world in a deadly way. Drake looked back at the man. If you're telling the truth, then you'll help me find this obsessive visitor. If you're lying, well, the evidence is already forming a case against you. Cooperation is in your best interest. The visitor sighed, folding his hands. Detective, I am as invested in finding the truth as you are. Lillian's death, it affects me. I assure you, I would have prevented it if I could. Drake studied him carefully. Ashford had a way of hiding intent behind civility, but subtle tells, micro-expressions, tone, hesitation, revealed more than words ever could. He would watch this man, probe further, but the real key lay elsewhere. The obsessive visitor, the one with knowledge, precision, and motive, was still out there, moving in the shadows of the city. Drake's mind began mapping the connections: Lillian's schedule, the workshop staff, the mysterious weekly visitor, and the brass button. Each thread would lead him closer to uncovering the killer, and each misstep could be fatal. Ashford's rain outside had stopped, but the storm of human deceit inside the workshop had only just begun. Drake Vane left the workshop behind, stepping into Ashford's narrow streets where the damp cobblestones reflected the pale morning light. The visitor's statements had narrowed the focus, but the real breakthrough lay in tracing Lillian Fairchild's final movements. Each appointment, each client, was a potential clue, and Drake knew that precision in tracking behavior often revealed the unseen. He returned to Lillian's small flat above a millinery shop, the air inside faintly scented with wood polish and lavender. The walls were covered with sketches, measurements, and detailed notes. Every cabinet, every drawer she had crafted, was meticulously planned. Drake ran a finger along the edge of a drafting table, noting a set of sketches that had been recently folded back. Samuel's words echoed, a visitor who came weekly, obsessed with measurements. Drake scanned the notes, looking for inconsistencies or recent changes. One sketch caught his eye: a tall cabinet with hidden compartments, annotated with an unfamiliar hand. The handwriting was precise but slightly erratic, unlike Lillian's usual smooth script. Drake folded the sketches carefully and examined the ledger for appointments. The last entry before her death was for a visit from Carrington, a name he hadn't seen before. The time matched the window in which she had been killed. He scribbled notes in his weatherproof notebook: visitor, obsession, sketches altered, last appointment. Detective. A voice interrupted. Drake looked up to see Mrs. Hollingsworth, the millinery shop owner, peeking through the doorway. Her expression was wary but cooperative. I saw her yesterday. Carrington came by. Tall man, dark coat, polite, but there was something off about him. He lingered longer than usual. I thought he was too curious about her work. Drake's eyes narrowed. Did he speak to you at all? No, sir. Just a nod, and he paid in advance for something unusual. Lillian seemed nervous afterward. She didn't say much, just that she had to finish his work today. Drake nodded, forming a mental map of the timeline. Carrington's visit coincided with Lillian's last known movements, and his obsession with measurements matched the killer's signature precision. The brass button, the tape measure, these were the killer's calling card, but Carrington's interaction with Lillian placed him near the scene at the critical time. He turned to Samuel, who had accompanied him. We need to trace this Carrington. Find out where he came from, who he paid, and why he fixated on Lillian. Every detail matters. Samuel nodded, urgency in his eyes. I'll check the workshop records, sir. Maybe deliveries, letters, something that tells us more about him. Drake looked back at the flat, the sketches, the tools. Ashford's cityscape outside seemed benign, but he knew better. The killer's mind was methodical, observing, calculating, and leaving traces only a trained observer could piece together. "This isn't just about a murder, Samuel," Drake said quietly. "It's about understanding why someone can turn obsession into a weapon. And we're close to seeing that clearly." As they left the flat, Drake's eyes scanned the streets, already tracing the potential route Carrington had taken. Footprints, letters, small overlooked details. Ashford had a way of hiding truths in plain sight. And Drake Vane had learned long ago that the city whispered its secrets only to those willing to observe every nuance. Drake Vane moved quickly through the narrow lanes of Ashford, the morning sun barely penetrating the dense fog lingering over the streets. Every step was measured, every glance deliberate. He knew that someone as meticulous as Carrington would notice unusual movement, and he needed to stay unseen until the right moment. Samuel trailed behind, clutching a bundle of letters and workshop receipts he had gathered. "Detective, look at this," he whispered, spreading the papers on a nearby bench. Carrington made several payments over the past month, always in cash, always oddly timed. And these deliveries, he pointed to a series of addresses, mostly to storage units and small workshops. Lillian's was the only residence he visited directly. Drake leaned in, examining the entries. The pattern was deliberate. Carrington wanted access to Lillian's workspace, not her home. He wanted her hands, her measurements, her craft. The implications were chilling. He knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it, Drake said. Precision, control, everything he did was methodical. That aligns with the murder signature. Tape measure, exact placement, no chaos. A soft footstep echoed behind them. Drake's hand moved subtly toward his revolver, his steel-gray eyes scanning the shadows. A figure emerged from the fog. A man, tall, coat dark, hat pulled low. Carrington. "Detective Vane," Carrington said smoothly, voice calm. "I expected you. And you brought the boy. How diligent." Drake stepped forward, notebook poised. "I want the truth, Carrington. Every detail of your visits to Lillian Fairchild. Who else knew of her routines? What did you hope to gain from your commissions?" Carrington smiled faintly, the shadow of amusement in his eyes. "Detective, I am merely a collector of fine craftsmanship. Lillian's talent is unmatched. I visited to ensure the work met my standards. There's all been unfortunate events beyond that were accidents, I assure you." Drake's eyes didn't waver. Accidents don't leave tape measures around a victim's waist, nor do they leave scuffed floors, misplaced tools, and brass buttons on the cobblestones outside. Your obsession went further than appreciation. You watched, timed, and knew her routines. "Tell me why." Carrington's smile faded slightly. "You think in extremes, detective. I observe. I collect. Lillian knew this, and she consented to the attention. Her death, it is regrettable, but I did not, could not, cause it." Drake crouched, examining the footprints near the alley where the button had been found. "Someone else was here, Carrington. You are not the only observer. But your obsession made it easy for them. You provided the map, unknowingly, for someone meticulous enough to follow it." Carrington's eyes flickered with recognition, and a hint of fear crossed his face, quickly masked. "So, you believe a third party is responsible?" "I do," Drake said calmly, standing. "And I know how they worked. They understood Lillian's habits, the layout of the workshop, and your routines. They used your obsession to execute their plan. But one mistake, one footprint, one lost button, and the pattern becomes visible." Samuel swallowed audibly, witnessing the confrontation. Drake's revolver remained at his side, but his presence radiated control. Carrington's calculated demeanor was faltering. "You'll help me identify this third party," Drake continued, voice precise. "Because if you refuse, your obsessive behavior may be misunderstood as complicity. And Ashford has a long memory for such details." Carrington's jaw tightened. "Very well, detective. I will cooperate. But understand this. My involvement is strictly observational. You'll see soon enough who truly turned precision into murder." Drake nodded. The pieces were starting to align. Obsessive visitor, meticulous murder, overlooked clues. The killer's profile was emerging, but Ashford had a way of hiding the final stroke in plain sight. And Drake Vane intended to uncover it, one precise observation at a time. Drake, Vane, and M. Carrington moved through Ashford's narrow streets, the fog curling around gas lamps like silent witnesses. Carrington, now cooperative, led them toward a cluster of old warehouses near the river docks. Each building was worn and silent, but Drake noted the faint hum of activity from one particular structure, a workshop tucked behind rusted gates and half hidden by ivy. "This is it," Carrington said quietly. "I never entered here myself, but Lillian mentioned deliveries. I suspected someone else was involved, though I could not confirm it." Drake's eyes scanned the perimeter. Footprints led into the building, then vanished. The alley behind it had a faint trace of varnish dust, matching the residue from Lillian's workshop. "Someone has been moving between workshops," he muttered. "Not to steal, but to observe and manipulate. Whoever it is knows the trade, knows the city, and knows how to leave just enough traces to mislead." He pushed open the gate carefully. The hinges groaned, echoing in the morning mist. Inside, the workshop smelled of fresh wood, varnish, and something else, a faint metallic tang that made Drake pause. He crouched near a workbench. A tape measure lay coiled, dusted with fine sawdust. Too deliberate to be accidental. "Detective," Samuel whispered from behind, his eyes wide. "It's like a mirror of Lillian's workshop." Drake nodded. "Exactly. The killer replicated her space, possibly to feel in control or to stage the murder. Notice the measurements on the table. They match her last project exactly. Someone knew what she was working on and used it as a blueprint." Carrington moved closer, frowning. "She mentioned this space once. A friend of hers, a craftsman, said he used it occasionally. But I never knew him well. She said he was precise, obsessive, and very private." Drake's mind worked rapidly. The pattern was clear. The killer had knowledge of Lillian's routines, her tools, and her trusted contacts. And now, this hidden workshop connected the dots. Whoever had used it was not just familiar, they were intimate with her methods. He noticed a series of footprints leading toward a back room. Kneeling, he examined the floor. The prints were smaller than Carrington's, and the pressure indicated a lighter frame. Someone agile, careful, and confident in moving without making noise. Drake opened the door to the back room. Inside, dozens of sketches, tape measures, and wooden prototypes were neatly arranged, as if waiting for inspection. A single note lay atop a stack of papers. "Measure twice, strike once." Drake's lips tightened. A signature of the killer. "Whoever did this," Drake said quietly, "planned it meticulously. They weren't just killing. They were making a statement, demonstrating control over precision and craft. The tape measure is more than a tool, it's their mark." Carrington's expression darkened. "I feared something like this." Lillian spoke of someone who studied her work obsessively, someone who would go to any lengths to perfect control. Drake carefully collected evidence, noting fingerprints, dust patterns, and the placement of tools. Every detail mattered, each a thread leading to the person capable of transforming obsession into murder. As they left the hidden workshop, Drake looked back once more. The shadows clung to the corners, hiding secrets that Ashford had whispered for centuries. But Drake had a map now, a trail woven in precision, and he was determined to follow it, step by step, measurement by measurement, until the killer was revealed. Back at the workshop, Drake Vane spread the collected sketches, tape measures, and notes across a broad oak table. The morning sun filtered through grimy windows, illuminating the fine details of Lillian's work and the subtle deviations left by the hidden workshop's occupant. Every line, every mark, spoke to Drake, whispering the story of methodical obsession. Samuel hovered nearby, still pale from the morning's revelations. "Detective, do you think, could one person really plan all this?" Drake's gaze didn't leave the papers. "Obsession doesn't follow limits, Samuel. When precision and control are valued above all, someone can orchestrate events that seem impossible. Our killer didn't just act, they measured, calculated, and anticipated every move." Carrington leaned over the table, voice low. "These deviations, they're subtle. Only someone intimately familiar with Lillian's work would notice them or dare alter them. Someone who had access, someone she trusted. Drake nodded slowly, running a finger along a faint smudge on one of the sketches. And that trust was exploited. Whoever killed her didn't just want her dead, they wanted to demonstrate mastery. The tape measure is a signature, a message to anyone who reads it carefully. He turned to the two men. We have three possible leads. First, those who worked with her daily, including Samuel and the proprietor. Second, those who visited regularly, such as Carrington. Third, someone entirely unknown, someone who knew her habits well enough to manipulate them remotely. Carrington's expression darkened. I told you, there was someone who visited weekly, asking precise questions about cabinets, measurements, and tools. Lillian said he was peculiar, meticulous, almost fanatical. I suspect him. Drake's eyes narrowed. That visitor is our primary suspect. But we need proof, something that connects him directly to the hidden workshop, the tape measure, and Lillian's last project. Samuel suddenly spoke, voice hesitant. Detective, I remember something. Lillian mentioned a small package arriving last week. She didn't open it immediately. Said it had no return address and felt deliberate. Could that be connected? Drake's mind raced. A package, unknown sender, arriving days before her death. He noted it, a potential link between Lillian, the hidden workshop, and the obsessive visitor. We need to trace this package, he said. Every detail matters. Weight, wrapping, handwriting, stamps. If our visitor is involved, it's likely he sent it. Carrington frowned. If that's the case, then Lillian's killer isn't just someone who observed. He planned the entire sequence meticulously. Each step leads directly to her. Drake's steel-gray eyes scanned the table again, mapping the patterns, cross-referencing notes, and forming the killer's profile in real time. And Ashford has a way of hiding those who plan meticulously. But precision leaves a trail, and I followed trails. He picked up the tape measure from the hidden workshop, coiling it slowly in his hand. This object is more than evidence, it's a statement. The killer is meticulous, obsessive, and controlling, and they're about to make another mistake. The three men exchanged tense glances. Outside, the streets of Ashford were calm, deceptively quiet. But Drake knew better. The city's shadows held secrets, and he had only begun to unravel the threads of obsession that led to murder. Drake Vane spent the afternoon planning carefully. The streets of Ashford were silent witnesses, their cobblestones slick with recent rain. Every alley, every doorway, could conceal the obsessive visitor, or someone else entirely. But Drake had a theory, and it required precision, patience, and a subtle touch of misdirection. He gathered Samuel and Carrington in the workshop. We need to lure him out, Drake said, voice low and controlled. He thinks he's careful, thinks no one can anticipate his movements. But we know his obsession. He will revisit the workshop, check the hidden space, or attempt to reclaim something he left behind. Samuel paled. But what if he suspects a trap? Drake's steel-gray eyes met his. Obsession blinds a man. It makes him predictable. He will focus on details, not the broader picture. And that focus, our advantage, will give us the upper hand. Carrington nodded slowly. You want him to return to the hidden workshop? And we'll be ready. Every footprint, every shadow, every sound monitored. I'll position myself with a clear line of sight and my revolver ready. Samuel, you'll observe from the window. Any movement outside the alley, any sign he's approaching, alert me immediately. The plan was set. The workshop was cleared, lights dimmed, and the hidden workshop subtly exposed as bait. Hours passed slowly, the tension growing with every tick of the clock. Outside, the fog thickened, wrapping Ashford in a ghostly silence. Then, near midnight, a faint sound, footsteps on wet cobblestones, echoed from the alley. Drake's eyes narrowed. The figure approached cautiously, pausing at the gate before entering. The visitor? Or the obsessive killer? Drake crouched behind a workbench, revolver in hand, observing the man slip inside. He moved with deliberate care, scanning the workshop, eyes drawn to the hidden room. The tape measures, sketches, and prototypes, everything meticulously arranged, drew him in like a moth to flame. Drake waited. One misstep, one moment of distraction, and he would act. The man knelt near the hidden room, fingers brushing the edge of the table. He was meticulous, obsessive, focused entirely on the contents of the room. And that single moment, his focus narrowed, was all Drake needed. "Detective Vane," the man whispered, startled, turning to face the shadowed figure behind the bench. How did you?" Drake's voice cut through the tension, calm but unyielding. "Observation, patience, and understanding. You left traces too precise to be ignored. Every footprint, every mark, every object arranged, led me here. Now it ends." The man froze, weighing options, calculating escape, but the alley was monitored, the workshop secured. The obsessive visitor, brilliant in planning and precise in execution, had walked straight into the trap Drake had set. Samuel watched from the window, breath held, as Drake advanced slowly, revolver leveled but voice steady. "Step away from the work and no one gets hurt. You can still cooperate, or you can force this to become much worse." The visitor's eyes darted, calculation clashing with panic. His obsession, his need to control, measure, and perfect, had led him directly to Drake Vane. And Drake knew, as he stepped closer, that the final confrontation was imminent. The workshop seemed impossibly still, the usual scent of varnish and sawdust mingling with tension. Drake Vane stepped closer to the man crouched near the hidden room, steel-gray eyes unblinking. The obsessive visitor's hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm he tried to project. "Detective," the man said, voice low, controlled yet strained, "you've anticipated everything. But you don't understand why. You see only the surface." Drake's gaze didn't waver. "Then explain. Why Lillian Fairchild? Why the hidden workshop? Why the precision, the tape measure, the footprints?" The man straightened slowly, running a hand through his dark hair. "Control, perfection, understanding. Lillian's work was immaculate. I wanted to possess it, to master it. But she refused to be possessed. So I created a space where I could manipulate, observe, and perfect her routines. She never knew the extent. Until I miscalculated." Carrington's face darkened. "You killed her? You planned her death?" The visitor shook his head, almost defensively. "No, I never meant to, not like that. I wanted control, not murder. But obsession, it has a mind of its own. I engineered the environment, the timing, the placement, and she fell into it. I didn't strike the final blow. It was my system, my control that caused it." Drake's jaw tightened. "That's a convenient excuse. Someone dies because of your obsession. You are still responsible. Precision doesn't absolve guilt." Samuel whispered from the window, voice shaky. "Detective, he's telling the truth in a way. He set the stage, but didn't commit the act himself." Drake's eyes flicked to Samuel, then back to the visitor. "True or not, you manipulated events to the point where death became inevitable. Ashford has no tolerance for such precision when it ends in murder. But I want to understand everything, every visit, every step, every package, every tape measure. We need the full picture to prevent another tragedy." The visitor nodded, shoulders sagging. "Very well. I will tell you everything. But you must promise me discretion. My obsession, it's not all darkness. Some of it is admiration, respect for craft. That part must remain intact." Drake lowered his revolver slightly. "You'll have your story recorded, but justice must follow. Obsession without accountability is still lethal. Tell me everything from the first visit to the last misstep that led to Lillian's death." He spoke for hours, detailing each appointment, every delivery, every calculated observation. The hidden workshop, the brass button, the tape measure, all pieces fell into place. Obsession, when taken to extremes, had transformed admiration into an orchestrated death. By the time the visitor finished, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across Ashford's cobblestones. Drake closed his notebook, resolute. "We understand now. And now the city understands who bears responsibility. You will face justice, but your meticulousness will help prevent others from falling into the same pattern. Carrington exhaled, relief mingling with exhaustion. It's over, finally. Drake's gaze swept the workshop, lingering on the hidden room, the sketches, the tape measures. For now, he murmured, obsession has a way of returning if left unchecked. But here, tonight, Ashford's precision has been restored. The streets of Ashford were damp with evening mist as Drake Vane stepped out of the workshop, notebook secured and revolver holstered. The city had a way of reclaiming normalcy after a storm of deceit, but Drake knew that nothing truly returned unchanged. He glanced back at the hidden workshop, now sealed and catalogued by the authorities. Every sketch, every tool, every tape measure that had marked Lillian Fairchild's death had been documented, evidence preserved for trial. Carrington walked beside him, coat drawn tightly against the chill. "I can't thank you enough, detective," he said quietly. "You didn't just uncover the truth, you prevented a repeat of this madness. But I owe her that at least." Drake's steel-gray eyes met Carrington's. "Admiration turned deadly is a lesson Ashford has learned. But your cooperation makes a difference. The city isn't just about shadows and secrets, it's about the consequences of obsession. You helped clarify that." Samuel trailed slightly behind, still pale but steady. "Detective, what happens now? With the visitor, with the workshop, with everything?" Drake exhaled slowly, voice measured. "The visitor faces justice, Samuel. The workshop will be secured, projects catalogued, and lessons preserved. Lillian's legacy remains intact, even if her life was stolen. And you keep records, watch for anomalies, and ensure precision doesn't become obsession." As they walked through the fog-shrouded streets, Drake felt the familiar pull of Ashford, the city that had shaped him, tested him, and now, in a small but significant way, allowed him to restore order. Every shadow, every cobblestone, every whispering alley had been part of the puzzle, and he had traced the lines with patience and clarity. Carrington broke the silence. "Do you ever tire of this, Drake? Chasing the meticulous, the obsessive, the criminal minds hidden in plain sight?" Drake's eyes softened slightly, though his gaze remained steady. "Ashford doesn't allow for fatigue. Not if you intend to see justice done. But it does reward attention to detail, patience, and understanding human nature. That's what keeps me going." Samuel nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of Drake's words. "I think I understand now. Precision is valuable, but unchecked, it can destroy." "Exactly," Drake said. "And that's why we observe, record, and intervene. Obsession is predictable when you know where to look." As the trio reached the main thoroughfare, the mist began to lift, revealing the first glow of street lamps reflected on wet cobblestones. The city breathed around them, indifferent yet alive, hiding its secrets but revealing them to those patient enough to see. Drake paused, looking toward the horizon where Ashford's skyline met the fading twilight. Another case would come, another pattern would emerge. But tonight, at least, one obsessive mind had been stopped, one life avenged, and one city's balance slightly restored. He adjusted the brass watch on his wrist, the cracked glass catching the lamp's glow. A reminder of time, of precision, and of the responsibility that came with observing the smallest details. In Ashford, even the tiniest misstep could cost a life, but tonight, justice had prevailed. The morning after the arrest was unusually clear. Sunlight pierced through the fog, glinting off the wet cobblestones and warming the stone facades of Ashford's old buildings. Drake Vane walked slowly through the familiar streets, the city feeling both lighter and heavier at once. Lighter for the resolution, heavier for the truths revealed. He paused outside the now sealed workshop, where the authorities were cataloging the remaining tools, sketches, and evidence. The hidden room, once the stage of obsession and death, had become a symbol of what meticulous planning unchecked by conscience could produce. Drake's steel-gray eyes scanned the facade, taking in every detail, storing it for reflection. Carrington approached, coat still drawn tight, hands tucked into pockets. "I've been thinking about Lillian," he said quietly. "Her work, her skill, she deserved better. I feel responsible, even though I didn't directly harm her." Drake regarded him with calm understanding. Indirect involvement can be as dangerous as direct action. Your obsession allowed someone else to manipulate circumstances, but your cooperation now ensures that the truth is clear. You've helped preserve her legacy, even if you cannot change her fate. Samuel, still pale but steadier, lingered behind. Detective, what about the visitor? What happens to him now? Drake's gaze softened briefly. He will face the consequences of his actions. Obsession doesn't excuse responsibility. But this city teaches a clear lesson: patterns can be tracked, behaviors predicted, and lives protected, if someone pays attention. The three walked together through the streets, each step echoing softly against the stone. Ashford, with all its hidden alleys, foggy corners, and whispered secrets, seemed almost alive in its quiet observation. Drake's mind, as always, catalogued details: the irregular shape of a lamppost, the pattern of footprints, the tilt of a shutter, small threads that could unravel future mysteries. They reached the riverside, the water calm and reflective. Drake stood at the edge, looking at the mirrored skyline, thinking of Lillian Fairchild, her brilliance, and the deadly consequences of human obsession. Precision is powerful, he said, voice low, but only when tempered by conscience. We must never forget that. Carrington nodded, understanding finally dawning. And the city, Ashford, it holds its secrets, but it also reveals them to those who are patient enough to see. Yes, Drake replied, and that is why we remain vigilant, why we observe, record, and act. Patterns emerge if you know where to look, and lives can be saved if someone pays attention. Samuel exhaled, tension easing. Then, this is closure? Drake glanced once more at the hidden workshop, now a silent monument to obsession, precision, and consequence. For now, he said, closure is never final in Ashford. But today, justice has been served, lessons have been learned, and the city remains intact. He turned, adjusting the cracked glass of his brass watch, and walked back into the streets, ready for the next shadow, the next pattern, and the next truth waiting to be uncovered. Ashford called to those who could read its details, and Drake Vane always listened. The morning sun reflected on the wet cobblestones, and for the first time since Lillian's death, the city felt quiet, steady, and just slightly safer. You've just heard The Measure of Deceit, a Drake Vane mystery, written and narrated for Audible Archives. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories.